But unless we do bring these chemicals under better control, we are certainly headed for disaster.
The environmental movement, which is now calling for a ban on coal, oil and gas, has its origins in a campaign that began 5 decades ago. Rachel Carson, an American marine biologist, claimed that the pesticide DDT was a danger to animal and ultimately human life. This very effective campaign led to a near worldwide ban on DDT, which had disastrous consequences.
Well, it all began with Rachel Carson, and it began with the notion that DDT was single-handedly responsible for the decline of predatory birds like owls and eagles and hawks. And at the time, the story was believed by everyone.
Silent Spring, Rachel Carson's 1962 best-selling book, demonized the pesticide DDT, which had previously been considered a life-saving invention.
This occurred largely because of speculation, not really documented by good scientific evidence, and it became a movement. It became an enormous movement.
Well, Darren, this is, of course, the Going the Distance pre-convention tour for Al Gore. Here, in touting his commitment to the environment, one of his favorite issues, he toured the Rachel Carson homestead. Silent Spring, credited by many, including Vice President Gore, as the book that really set the stage for the modern environmental movement.
Of course, the banning of DDT on a worldwide basis caused organizations like the World Health Organization and USAID, humanitarian organizations, to stop using DDT for the control of mosquitoes which cause malaria. That clearly resulted over the last 40 or 50 years in millions of people dying because DDT was no longer being used. It had been eradicated from large parts of the world, and still is, thankfully, but other parts of the world, particularly Africa, continued to have the malaria-bearing mosquito, and after the use of DDT was ended, malaria skyrocketed in countries like Uganda and Mozambique and South Africa.
Malaria has caused havoc in this country. It has caused a lot of damage to the economy of this country. On an average, we are talking about 370 children dying every day. So we're looking at hundreds of thousands every year. And we believe that even those who die of HIV/AIDS, most of them die, at the end of the day, die because of malaria.
Roy Innes is the chairman of the Congress of Racial Equality, known as CORE, one of the oldest American civil rights organizations. CORE was at the forefront of the March on Selma, the infamous Mississippi burning voter drive, and Martin Luther King's historic March on Washington. With the end of segregation and overt racism in America, Roy Innes is now fighting what he sees as another major human rights issue for black people. He is campaigning to overturn the ban on DDT, which he says has led to the deaths of 30 million people in the developing world. Most of the victims are children.
It is a human rights issue. Human rights and civil rights are intertwined. Things that affect people's development and things that tend to retard people's development is a human right and a civil rights question. To see a modern city as developed a city as Kampala, to see people still being victimized by malaria and victimized by those who will prohibit the use of DDT to protect themselves. It's a very painful thing to see.
I'm Don Roberts. I was a professor of tropical public health, and I taught at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. It's our DOD medical school. And I've had a career doing research in medical zoology, specifically on malaria and malaria vectors, and some on malaria epidemiology. Malaria is a parasitic disease. It's transmitted by mosquitoes, specifically Anopheles mosquitoes. The number of people infected with malaria in the world is just a guessing game. The estimates vary from 300 million to 500 million, upwards to 800 million. This is a terrible burden of disease on poor people in poor countries. It is a serious public health problem. And the people who are saying that we do not need DDT, I would have to assume have an agenda that is separate from the agenda of controlling malaria, reducing death, and reducing disease in vulnerable populations.
It is really for all of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that we fight to protect the air we breathe and the water we drink. And it's for them that we also fight to honor the legacy of Rachel Carson.
I see misery. I see misery that could have been avoided. These people must be forced to consider the pragmatic consequences of what they hope for or what they believe. I don't believe that the people who oppose DDT are just evil people, but they're people who are wrong.